That's a very good idea. Thanks for the prompt.
Cool.
So, thoughts, everyone, on Doug and Ruth sharing thoughts about scope, what's our purpose of getting together, and um, what's alive and calling.
Yeah, I'm open to that. It would be helpful if Doug could go first, just as I get settled. I feel like I did share this um in the WhatsApp group, but
Mm-hmm.
I could just kind of reiterate those key points if that's helpful. I don't think I have anything further at this time, but yeah, happy to share that here in this context if that's helpful.
I think it would be. So, Doug, do you want to take us away?
Sure. Give me 1 second. I just want to have my, you know, my ADD neurodivergent minimum required viable set up in place. So when I'm done, I can do what I do and capture where we go. Um, so I'd like to pull back on um, the whole subject domain, like take it to a 60,000 foot level and frame what for me is the it that I think all of these miscellaneous things and pieces are circling. Um, because for me that helps with sort of framing the larger context. Um, so I had two touch point when Trey invited me to the ergodicity um, workshop. It was in the context of two touch points, one which was hers and the other which was the folks in the pivot, Melanie and and Mayan, and their undertaking. And because I'm in both of those, this invocation of the commons trust construct had been raised. I was unfamiliar with it. Did a little bit of poking around in Graham World, um, and then went into the ergodicity thing. And I believe what it speaks to is um, trying to figure out how to do finance, business, economy differently, and how to move it in a direction that bridges from the system we're in now, which is fiat currency, profit, scarcity, power, and control over, and extractive, exploitive. That's sort of current paradigm with fiat currency at the center, at the belly of the beast, to what's the new that's needed. And I think also, although it wasn't, within the Graham frame, and it wasn't within the frame of the holo piece, um, but is explicitly in the frame within Kylie's and my past conversations and my ruminations over the last 10 years, which is the whole challenge around ownership. That ownership is really the core feature of the prevailing system that is the source of all the problems. And there's a a very clear relationship between the concept of ownership, or by extension, control, power and control over, um, as it relates specifically to resources, and the concept of scarcity. Like, you don't have scarcity without ownership. The principle of ownership begets scarcity because it creates the duality of the haves and the have-nots, or the haves and the ones with the needs. Um, and um, so that's so I'm going to stop there as the 60,000 foot. And then I have places to go in relation to ergodicity, in relation to a lot of the things that are going on in this space, and Holo and their aspirations. But I'll stop there just to provide a breath and an opportunity for tailoring, tweaking, modifying.
So just as a general, for what it's worth, I've always got 10 million things to say. I like that as the 60,000 foot view. For me, the one thing I might just kind of add in, or maybe question a little bit, the finance, business, economy, doing that differently is, for me anyway, maybe not as much the focus as the what you pointed to at the end around ownership, and like what continues to generate this paradigm that we've got, that's such a stinking mess. So because when we think in terms of, is there such a thing as finance? Is there such a thing as economy? Is there such a thing as business at all, if we don't have ownership at the center of things? So just as will we even use the same words? I don't know. I'd like to put that out there as a general query, and then pass either to, actually, Ruth, do you want me to pass to you or to Parmjit at this stage with food there?
Either works. Yeah. Any preference, Parmjit?
Well, if you're happy to talk, yeah, go ahead.
Then okay, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, then I'll dig in. I mean, first off, hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Thanks for your patience with me. Thank you for that, Doug. I feel like that also really helped orient me. I probably still don't have too much to say. I think I'm still quite a bit in the unknown here. It was true. I am still kind of discovering why I'm here. Maybe what I'll say is that I feel like part of my role also just on the planet is more on the internal personal transformation that needs to happen so that this world can open into. I'm enjoying Charles Eisenstein's term, the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, so that it can truly open into that. I am a big I feels like my part in the process is more on that side of the equation. How do I support individual humans to inhabit the qualities of body and mind, and learn to be with the hard things inside ourselves in a way that can be where we can then relate to each other differently. That's so I'll just say that, and I'm still understanding how that fits in here, though I feel very grateful and excited to be a part of the conversation, and learning a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I'll pause there. Thank you very much. Over to you, Parmjit, if you want to share something.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Yeah, it's exciting. I can see the 6,000-foot view, which is a view where each sector of life fits within natural law, whether it's to do with how we see law itself, or science, or health, or medicine, or education. And so in that place, when we get to that, the ownership thing will be dissolved. Then on the other hand, at ground level, if you like, if you're going to kind of see it as a ground to going up, just for the sake of doing it that way, you know, and this is based on recent conversations I've been having with my ex and trying to reach that place of belonging and agency as a family within a broken family system, and watching how no matter how much I present non-judgment and all the things that Ruth is talking about, it's very difficult where people are immersed in this water of duality and trauma. And so, you know, there's that, and then there's like every shade of whatever color you can see, kind of in between all of that. People like Graham are playing within more or less kind of looking at finance as finance, but doing it differently. People like Eric Harris Braun that we've just been watching have got a higher level vision around it. And so people like Dale Pond as well, he's coming at it from a grounded understanding of natural law and how that relates to molecules and atoms and everything else. And so for me, there's a big overlap between natural law and how he's seeing things. How my family are seeing things, there's hardly any overlap, because, you know, they're looking at, instead of looking at human emotions, they're like, well, how can this pill stop me from getting depressed? You know, kind of mindset. And Nassim Haramein as well, who I went to see a few weeks ago now. A lot of overlap with stuff that Dale Pond was saying. So we've got the capacity as human beings to just think of something, and like the technology would be like space alien UFOs that can become invisible or visible. This is what the physics is saying, okay? Like, who needs money in that system? But I would love to play where Eric Harris Braun of Holochain is talking about. That for me would be a delightful place to play. But having said that, also kind of swooping in and out of Graham's world and swooping in and out of all the other worlds as well, because everything is joined. And So there's something about heads of agreement is something that Trey mentioned in how she's doing her trust, like contracts and things. I think contracts are going to be like a part of like how contracts evolve. And so if you can start, instead of like the contract, if you can start at the heads of agreement, and so what do you need? What are the components of a heads of agreement before you do the heads of agreement? You know, like a kind of a causal tree, dependency tree, Eric was talking about. Those kind of things appeal to me. And then the other way that we could look at it would be looking at how we're operating, and all that thing about threes, like you've got the female, the male, and the neutral. Like maybe we could look at our group and think about, well, what's the female component, what's the male component, and what's the neutral component? That might be helpful to then get to a place where we understand what kind of thing a heads of agreement place might need to have, what components it might need. So there's some of my thoughts just to kick us off. Oh, and stuff about the relational stuff. I really loved the tools and assets thing that he was saying, that you don't have to integrate or pay for integration, because the whole way that stuff is designed in their IT system, you know, it has to be integrated. That's the kind of contract, if you like, that they've got, like agreement, that's how they're going to operate when they're looking at assets to start off with. And so when you're starting from that place, I think you've got to rethink, so what does it mean for how we look at something as being in the private, the business, or the public realm? You know, the relationships between them are probably going to shift, but you know, we need to consider, well, how would they shift then? Yeah, so that's the other point I wanted to make. Over to Kylie.
Well, this is awesome. I keep hearing actually much the same thing, sort of being repeated from different angles, which I always love, actually. Ruth, I probably want to talk to what you were saying first about this sort of not feeling quite sure what you hear with the individual focus. For me, a lot of this is like, and this is maybe part of where I was going back from the like the sort of drawing back myself from the like the business and finance and economy and so on. In that sense that to me the underlying thing, I guess, is what relationship do we have with ourselves, with other, and with the world? And the ownership thing is sort of in large part, but not entirely, about that relationship with world, especially. Like, do we get to own something outside ourselves or not? Because whatever choice we make with something like that has so many consequences down the line. So that we use money, for instance, is often it's about that we allow assets, for instance, an accumulation of assets. But then there's also the, you know, how do we, you know, Ruth, what you were saying about the being able to relate differently. So that's kind of looking at that relationship with other as well as the relationship with self. And so that one gets affected as well. And I think, you know, Charles Eisenstein, you know, the phrase that I kind of put with him is, you know, that more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, is kind of talking about, again, all of them. So yeah, I don't see them as being actually that distinct. Parmjit, what you were saying about the heads of agreement, it sort of dovetails in really interestingly with something I've been thinking about in terms of principles instead of the concrete things. So we end up with a lot of lists that are very tightly bound to like one particular concrete instance. And I think the idea with something like the heads of agreement is like, what are the principles that we're going to use to generate, like more specific ones? And so I feel that's something that we're probably all drawn to as well, even if we're not specifically talking about it as heads of agreement. But the interesting thing with heads of agreement is that that one is in that relationship to others. So it's like it's one of those three again. And sorry, I feel like I've just gone all over the place, but I just wanted to describe how I'm seeing it all feeling very much related, if not pinned, if that makes sense. So, open floor.
The other interesting thing I'm finding is that like you can present information to one level, but if like stuff about Nassim Haramein, I presented it to my ex and like they don't see it. It's like, no, I can't see that. Like this person over here who's debunking all of that, I can see that. And so it's like very interesting how people will choose their own levels of what they're going to see and what they're not going to see, and therefore who they are and how they relate to the other and to themselves and all the rest of it. It's like people kind of find their own level, and you can't kind of present something to somebody until they're ready for that particular aspect of physics or whatever it is. Yeah, so it kind of has a feeling of being auto-organizing. Don't know, there's probably a word for it.
I would offer being, the de facto being, and each person is their own being. And across their 5 bodies, across their physical experience, across their emotional frame, across their energetic frame, across their mental frame, across their spiritual frame, the dimensions of living, each individual is as they are. And in the elemental practice, Kylie's familiar with this. We have a questionnaire that if you looked at it would seem sort of strange. But there are 2 pages. In the first page, the person's responses indicate their elemental state on arrival when they were born across those 5 dimensions, those 5 facets of the sort of energetic fields that make up life elementally. And the second page is today. And the change or delta between what they arrived with and where they've landed, we're pretty good at interpolating what happened to them based on the impacts on their current elemental state of balance or imbalance. And it's rare that we've done a reading and had somebody go, not have a recognition response and go, well, yeah, like, if the shoe fits, one of those kinds of deals. And so it's that natural, it's, you know, the individual energetic dance, internal dance, Ruth, to your point, of where is a person at in the present moment? And then where are people at in the present context and construct? And Kylie and I were having a conversation yesterday, and what we've created as a society and civilization is really psychotic. It's so far removed from natural law. It's so far removed from the natural world. You know, it's so far removed from um, the fundamental way the universe and reality works, and the ingredients of it, the dynamics and nature of it. And it's so uh, distorted and so abstracted and intellectualized and disconnected on a feeling level, on a sensing level, on a physical level. And I really think um, the question, I mean, the operating question for me in all of this stuff is, how do we do us different? How do we do us better? Some of you have heard probably way too many times already before. Um, and but the sort of immediate question of what's needed now, and that's on a human being level, on an experiential, emotional, physical being level, what's needed. Um, and you can apply that scalarly, you know, so for an individual across their 5 bodies, what do they need? What's imbalanced? What's missing? What's needed? For them to feel fully embodied, for them to be reconnected, be freed of fear, anxiety, uh, or pain, and to actually reconnect with joy. And which is really sort of wanting out there these days. Like there's not a lot of that to be found. And um, so I'm very centered in Ruth, where you're pointing in terms of on an individual and personal level. How can I catalyze a reawakening in people, a reconnecting in people, a remembering in people of their true nature, their own voice, authority, agency, their own sense and capacity to contribute and create and participate and connect, like on all those fundamental levels. And then on the doing side, like how can we do us differently, do us better collectively or collaboratively, which gets into more of the weeds a little bit. And there, I have sort of this I have this sort of, I don't know how to, I guess it's a kind of discernment, which is are individuals or folks with magic pills or brands or black boxes or solutions or frameworks or constructs or whatever's are they hawking their wares and really just playing the old paradigm forward, with the next shiny new thing or offering or solution as a golden idol? Or are they actually putting something on the table that's a value contribution, value add to the world, that's transcendent of their persona, them, as a brand? Are they truly in service to us doing differently, us doing better? And the culture as constituted really encourages and supports brands and things, nouns that can be sold. It's not so much focused on transcendent offerings in service to the collective and the commons that are not productized, that are not marketed. And the things that purport to be the new, the innovation, the solution, the salvation, but are still sort of afflicted and infected with that marketing selling energy of trying to convince, of trying to, enroll and trying to sell, ultimately end up being extensions of the old paradigm, playing it forward, which is about selling nouns and profit. And I'll stop there. Sorry for the length of that.
Oh, good, but you've given me about 30,000 things I want to say again. So one of the things that kind of jumped up for me, it's like, you're all familiar with my keratic flow work, at least to some extent. And probably also with the this idea that, like our civilization as a whole, and therefore many of us are feeling, because, we're not, we're all interconnected, depends on, we have different sensitivities to it, but it's there. Into the curator archetype, which is a very different kind of activity, and every activity has its own requirements to be able to be done healthily or not. And so the conditions that Doug was referring to there about, like the preference for brands and all that kind of stuff, that's the way that we've got our civilization structured, and that's completely toxic to curating. to actually finding what is really needed, what is really important, what really matters, to prepare for transformation, which is essentially what it is that we're needing to do. So some of what I suppose I like to think about, and I'd like to put this out there, is this question of, and I'm sort of channeling Trey here a bit, I suppose, like in terms of the phrasing, it's like, what does it take to make transformation possible? So, because everyone is coming from a different starting position, right? So some people are never going to prefer to step into the unknown. They're never going to prefer to do, the spiritual healing or what, whatnot, regardless of what the conditions are. Can we make space for that? Can we allow that to be without trying to drag individuals somewhere that they're not constitutionally really supposed to go? Because it's no better for us to do that than it is for the current, setup to be trying to force those of us who don't want to do that stuff to do that stuff. So it's kind of like, how do we loosen things up or free things up so that the people who do want to do this transformational work are able to, that it's possible for them. So this is kind of where I end up a lot in terms of thinking about the resourcing, the transition. So I'm going to go elemental a little bit on this. So signs of unhealthy curation the way that behave are either utopianism, so having some kind of solution and pushing it forward as the solution, when actually you really can't know because you haven't even explored what's possible. You're just kind of, picking an idea and gripping onto it for dear life. Or alternatively, nihilism, right? And that nihilism thing kind of looks like there's nothing anybody can do anyway, and it's all their fault. And, like the best thing we can do is just sort of collect a whole bunch of stuff and go and hide out in a bunker with a few people, and wait for everything to pass, right? And so the elemental side is that these are alternatively either with utopianism, overexpression of water and air, or with the nihilism, underexpression of water and air. And then, and Doug, if we're going to bring in the right elements for actually dealing with this, earth factors in both, right? So if you don't have enough air and you don't have enough water, then you're going to need to support the air, which is going to require earth, or the security, the stability, that sense of being able to trust that you've got enough to meet needs. But also the same for the utopian thing of like, okay, relax. Like you don't want the flooding of the water going everywhere, and you don't want the wind firing everything up. So it's like you need to have, again, the basic kind of needs, and probably bringing in fire as well, right, Doug? For the too much air. So you want a combination of stuff for self-care. So this is bringing in that individual looking after, but also a sense of that there is some sort of solid ground to rely on and to channel this, like mad rush of water everywhere. So I kind of keep ending up back at this thing of like, I don't want to think about it in terms of finance and business and so on, but that idea of like, how do we pool enough resources that more people can do healthy curating instead of just freaking out and either rushing to utopianism or getting completely depressed and going nihilistic. So anyway, I've spoken quite a bit there, but I wanted to throw that out.
Love that.
Thank you, Kylie. Thank you, everybody. Just such juicy, useful discussion. I not necessarily building on that, Kylie, in any way, but just want to kind of draw out a few pieces that had extra energy for me. Going back a little bit, Doug, that question, just what is needed? What I love about that is that it's really and when I think that question is useful, I mean, just speaking from my own experience is when I truly ask it from the present moment, and then the answer is there. So really living into that question from the present moment feels like the meaningful path forward. And it's just like such a better question when I think about what my mind can be occupied with sometimes. That's not so productive. That's a useful question. The other thing I want to draw like back out, I think you brought it up, Parmjit, but we've all been alluding to it, but that the balance of agency, connection, I just feel like those are two absolute keystones in humans, in human development. We need to turn up the dials on both of those. has certainly been a very big part of my journey, and they're dependent on each other, but also very separate skills, but also, you know, if we're weak in one, we can't really fully do the other. So, I feel like it also connects into what you were saying, Kylie, about like we can't force anybody. Fundamentally, it has to come from a true sense of agency, and a true sense of connection. So then coming back to the what's needed, when I really feel most in touch with that, I'm in touch with a sense of my own kind of separate being, body, self, that sense of agency, and a sense of like empowered responsibility to care for this. And then, but that is then occurring within the whole. And I'm still aware of and sensing that whole actively, and being held, letting myself belong in that whole, and therefore being nourished by the whole. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you. Thanks so much. Sorry, there was one more thing. Talking about that nihilism. It's just kind of a little sub point on that, which is and it was in Charles Eisenstein's book. There's a chapter on despair, and just how actually letting ourselves have that move through that authentic experience and feeling in our own systems, which I imagine everybody here has had many days and moments of that. And then I in no way do I think we need to kind of keep returning to that, but just I think that's part of what leads to the a big theme in my life right now is actually deepening my contact with no, which is painful, because in order to deepen my contact with the no, I have to feel the parts of me that are very that are in a lot of pain, because that's part of the information of the no. So yeah, just wanted to drop that in terms of the use of that despair. And yeah, yeah, really loved, that's so interesting the way the elements are threaded. Yeah, okay, thanks, that's it.
I'm curious, Parmjit, where are you?
My mind was just going to what the Dale chap was talking about, feminine energy, when Ruth was saying about what's needed. And wasn't it interesting that certain things emerged in terms of knowledge and how to do these etheric motor things that emerged at the same time as society started to look at women and say, well, actually, maybe you should have a vote. Maybe you are like a proper person after all. Yeah, for some reason, I was just going there. But yeah, I agree with everything Ruth said. And this relationality and being the best curator you can be is going to be very valuable. Knowing how to put create things that are going to create the substrate in a way that people can click bits together and take bits out according to how they operate the best. A little bit like he was talking about the IT tools and assets. That has to be the way to go. And so the principles are gonna, deciding what the principles are, or the heads of agreement, or whatever wording you want to use, is about kind of gaining clarity on what are those things. And so maybe the elemental framework could be one framework that could help us to get there. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time of exploration, that's for sure.
So Doug, I would like to hear a little more from you, since you still know the elements an awful lot better than I do. You're talking, say, if you can say a bit more about what you were telling me about earth and water being magnetic, with fire and air being electric. Is that right?
Yeah. So this actually it ties in. It ties into the divine feminine too, the Dale Pond invocation of that. So, and what you alluded to in terms of the nature of the imbalance and what's needed. And so earth and water are both the divine feminine elements. And energetically, they're the magnetic. Fire and air, which are the energetic body and the mental or intellectual body, are the masculine, divine masculine elements. And their nature is electrical. And then space is the container of the corporeal four, the ones that are actually manifest elements. And is transcendent of both because it's source, right? It's the spiritual body. Now, Kylie mentioned the need for earth. Earth as an element speaks to safety. So on a human, emotional, experiential level, in the context of that question of what's needed, and Ruth, that question is only relevant being oriented in the emergent present moment. Like the emergent present moment is the only moment that's living, moment to moment. That's where all the action is. Like that's where I create what I create. That's where I support and nourish what I support and nourish. That's where I hurt, harm, or damage what I hurt, harm, or damage. That's where I bring something from nothing into manifestation, is in the present moment. Everything in the rearview mirror is in the rearview mirror. It's not relevant to and doesn't inform what I do with this present moment. And everything I can project, because I'm such a clever rat with this thing sitting on my shoulders, everything I can project and create and abstract into the future is not really apropos, because it's projecting into a future that doesn't exist and may or may not ever come to happen. So, you know, the fact that I can do it, look, Ma, what I can do, in terms of projecting and abstracting, doesn't change the reality that I have absolutely no power, control, and authority over the future. And anything can happen anytime. And so, like, the present moment is like a really big deal. If I lose the rearview mirror and stop projecting, it's a full-time job just looking at what am I doing now? And how am I either contributing or not now? And how am I feeling in this moment now? And how am I, you know, affecting and or energizing and or sucking the life out of others now, like in this moment, right? And how conscious on an awareness level, not an intellectual abstraction level, but on a knowing level, am I of all of those dimensions in the present, in my exercise of my agency, my voice, what I do, what I say, how I relate, how I respond, how I contribute or not, how I support and help and love, or how I hurt and damage and affect negative. So, you know, a favorite expression of mine is, you know, I'm the God of my existence. My authority is absolute and unconstrained and unlimited. My generative potential is infinite. My ability and capacity to create and to affect is unbounded and unlimited. And my agency and authority stops at my skin. I have no power over anybody else or any other living, or of the planet or of the universe, but my power over me is 100% absolute. And the question is, what do I do with that? What are my, you know, what are the choices I make and what are the actions I take? I think Earth safety is essential in a world gripped by fear, where nobody feels safe and everybody is being bombarded with messages that says they should be afraid, they should be very afraid all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. that's a real challenge. And conversely, another element to the rescue in terms of helping somebody to reconnect with their earth and their ability to own their own safety in the midst of the maelstrom, is space. Now, space that in this context, it is not space at large, space disembodied and apart. It is their space. That's their spiritual body. That's their de facto connection to source and to all and to everything. That connection exists. This is the Dale Pond message, right? This is the divine feminine message. This is the going back to the ancients. This is sacred geometry message. Everything is a function of the one, and ratios relative to the one, and frequencies relative to the one, right? But it is one space, one's relationship with their space. It's how aware and conscious am I of that connectivity in the present moment. on a felt sense embodied level. And I'm complete. And Ruth, thank you for joining and being here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would love to re-listen to the recording, Kylie, also at some point if it's possible to have that shared. Okay, yes, I will slide out here. Thank you very, very much, each of you. A deep bow to each of you, and look forward to the next time. Okay. Okay.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Oh,
But yes, should we do a little bit of a checkout and wrap up, do you think? Doug, thank you, by the way, that was really helpful.
okay. I was quite tempted to come out with like an idea, but I'm not going to do that.
Well, you can't say that and not share.
Exactly. Just even
That's not, that's like, no.
Oh, I thought it wasn't allowed. I thought you guys don't want it. Okay, so let me think what it was. It was around the safety. And I was thinking about like my family who are not interested in like self-development, all that garbage. And so their safety is really rules and money. But then if you introduce space into it, that would really help, because the system is just flogging you to death and bringing out the fears and lack of safety. And so there's something about, what do you call it, when you kind of give money, universal basic income. But there has to be, you know, you can't just dish it all out. Like, it would be, what would be the principles and heads of agreement so that they can still keep rules and money and everything that is making them feel safe, but what else needs to be like happening there? So that was where I was going.
Oh, this is funny. This is what I'm in the middle of writing about at the moment. Doug had to hear a whole bunch about it last night.
Okay, cool.
But so just a thought maybe to kind of help, you know, pin this butterfly and hang it in the air.
Pinning butterflies again. Go on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Trey started it. Trey, it's all your fault. Yeah, is just thinking, okay, so countries like the UK, the US, to some extent at least, and Australia have social welfare programs, but they're conditional programs. Right? What if we just to start by going, okay, let's remove the conditions. People sign up, don't have to jump through hoops, but on the understanding that any income they receive, including UBI, is taxable, the same as everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, it's like people can sign up if they need it, or not if they don't. There's no checking. There's no, you have to do this. You have to apply for this many jobs per week or per fortnight or whatever. This is one of the conditions in Australia. It's just ridiculous. You don't have to provide information about how many assets you have to prove that you're poor enough to warrant it or anything like that. You just sign up, gets pushed back through the tax system if needed, you know, dealt with like that. Like, why do we have to have all of that administration? It's just adding layers of complication, administration, and administrative overhead for zero purpose.
But
so
that, depending on the state to do something, and like you might find a state somewhere, but that's not going to be an easy thing to find. or like having some money somewhere that's going to be coming through regularly. Like, how do you get that going?
Well, they're already spending it on welfare and admin. So it's
Social Security.
what's it? Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess if we can get someone to listen who's kind of, you know, in the old system, yeah, maybe that could happen. If not enough of us.
I mean, there is precedent if you look at the countries that have gone to national healthcare systems. You know, you can get into all sorts of debates about whether they're better, the service is better or worse off for nationalization of it. But as a practical matter, a country that every person in it has health coverage de facto is a big deal and a big difference than what's going on in the US right now, which is freaking insane. Siphoning for profit, you know, it's the medical industrial complex. And it's a profit business off people's disease and infirmity. And it's distorted and psychotic and at the expense of the poor and the disenfranchised. It's crazy.
And probably creates a constant low-level anxiety or
horrible,
even terror, you know.
horrible. And you know, I'll give you an example. Do you guys have a minute? I'll give you an example of like the haves and the have-nots around sort of ultimate recourse. So in the United States, you have Medicare. You hit retirement age and you qualify for Medicare, which is basically government coverage. Now, it's got parts, and there are parts it doesn't have, and you have to buy a supplemental policy for the things that it doesn't cover. You know, it's like not a holistic solution. You're not completely cared for, you're partially cared for. Like the powertrain, you know, is covered, but fluids and brakes, no. Like that, it's literally relating to human beings as cars. So now, when you are destitute, literally have completely run out of money, you have no assets, you then qualify for something called Medicaid, which is health coverage for the poor, and it covers everything. Right?
Yeah.
So we're going to take you down to zero. Now, Medicaid doesn't cover somebody who would qualify for independent living or an assisted living facility, which are generally for those with some measure of wealth, because they cost anywhere from $4,500 to $12,000 a month. But Medicaid go direct to nursing home. Even if you don't need nursing home level care, you're dumped into a nursing home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a little bit more of a Lego bricks approach to when it's needed, not separating health and social care, all of those things.
Right.
So it's not just to do with the money either, because in England you've got the NHS, but it's kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing in a way, because they're still privatizing a lot of it, like everything. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all of that. But then the other thing is around how much are holistic systems welcomed into that healthcare system. And even if it's not holistic, if it's conventional, I was talking to people who are looking at midwife training, and they were saying, this is a little bit kind of on the gory side, so I'm just warning you. When you give birth, there's a practice where you tear the bit when the baby's coming out, because the hole's really small and the head's really big. But to prevent that, like something really simple as putting your hands to provide pressure on the edges of where the hole is would prevent any tearing. But did they do that? No. Has it been proven that it really works and da-da-da? Yes. It's like, so what's going on there?
Go right to episiotomy, don't pass go, don't collect $200.
Yeah, like that.
It's draconian. It's really like, drill holes in people's heads and bleed
Yeah.
people with leeches. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, something that's interesting is like if you just think about, that phrase, data is the new oil, right? Information is so important. What if the only thing that was necessary to qualify for any healthcare whatsoever being paid is to provide information on what actually happened, how it actually went? Because that's providing tremendous value into the system.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And the
But-
only thing that can stop it so that you can't do it anymore is if you actually bullshit and you pretend something works when in fact it doesn't.
Right. Fabian and I did a rabbit hole. We do these pretty frequently, but we did a rabbit hole into why the business world could better serve their interests if they eliminated all projection work, all financial projection, all tracking and quantification and service to projection, financial projection, and other projections for risk and other projections for this and projections for that, that if they literally stopped projecting and all the resources dedicated to projecting and repurpose those resources to leveling the bar on internal node-to-node communication by and between every employee and designing the signaling systems to enable real-time immediate response to changes in anything, in any dimension, in any context.
Mm.
It would completely revolutionize and transform the enterprise and probably increase resiliency tremendously. And the number of facets and dimensions of savings and benefits were, filled a massive spreadsheet.
Yeah. And just imagine, like, even sort of going back to the that UBI kind of example. And those projections are generally out of fear because you're going to fail, right? And if you fail,
Absolutely.
end of the world. So, so of course you try and predict what's going to happen and you try and make what you think is a smart choice and all the rest of it. But it's actually all just fear driven because no plan ever survives contact with reality anyway. So it's a total waste of time. And if you could just sort of be a lot more present moment and a little less blaming and a little less thinking that, justice is actually up to us human beings. Of course it's not. But just having that stable safety thing of UBI available to everyone unconditionally, if you need it, yeah, I don't know. To me, that changes everything. It would actually change things like that, coming out with stupid projections all the time as well.
It's an abundance-oriented idea, collective meeting of individual needs is based on a principle that we can do that.
Oh, there's one other thing I'm thinking about, which is holding companies. Now, I tried to pay somebody in America and something went weird with it and they didn't get paid. And it's all to do with the holding company that holds the funds so they can get like whatever registered and numbers given out and things like that. So I guess what we would need would be like a holding company like that we had power over what's happening and where money's flowing.
Yeah, well, you could certainly set up a commons pool, basic income thing as well in smaller groups, even if you don't get the government to do it.
Oh no, I'm not thinking about government. They're never going to do it. Not
I wouldn't say never. I wouldn't.
not the British government.
I still wouldn't say never.
Well, not never as in never ever, but not the present guys that we've got, or they're like, yeah.
Let me tell you something just about the UBI thing. So I first heard about it in about 2008. Right. I had never heard of it before. I immediately started trying to do research on, who had talked about it. And yes, it's been getting talked about for a long time, but by very, very, very few people. Right? Nearly every, nobody knew what UBI meant. No one had heard of universal basic income when I started talking about it even back in 2018. When I left the job and started talking to people on the web. Now everyone knows.
Mm.
This is a change. This is something that is becoming closer and closer to being in the Overton window all the time. Oh, sorry, Overton window might not be familiar expression. It's just the things that you are allowed to discuss politically. So.
Yes. So that together with a flood of information about nurture and what the support, like what support looks like. We don't know what support looks like. We've never been told that. Yeah. That would go heaps and heaps. Yeah.
The power of speaking it. I have been in these kinds of spaces and conversational circles for over 10 years now.
Mm.
I have introduced languaging that had not been used in the way I was using it, that is now pervasive. And I know I was source.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not preoccupied with that. Like, that's not a meaningful thing to me. But words have huge power. Languaging has huge power. Introducing new orientational twists and turns has huge effect. And I'm with Kylie. I think anything is possible. Stars and the planets line up, and you never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. So things are happening now that we didn't think were possible. Mm.
Yeah. Now, I wish there were more things of a positive light and energy nature. Right now, the darkness really seems to be, strutting its stuff in ever more aberrant and loud ways. But I do think the light stuff doesn't get attention. Like, that's not featured on the media, but there's just as much of that going on out of view.
And one bit of earth that's nice to bring in, I think, to all of these conversations that we have with everybody. So not just us, but bringing in what I think is the common sense stuff that everyone recognizes when it's said, but that people aren't game to say because they say, oh, there isn't the political will for that, or no, that doesn't you know, there's no way that that would ever happen, or, you know, that kind of feel is, it's like, but to kind of go, this is common sense, you know, to not just be cowed by the psychosis,
Mm.
I think would, you know, just generally makes
Yeah.
a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because yeah, if we try and say things in a way that they're going to find acceptable, you just end up in these like convoluted, you know, trying to second guess, figure out what might be okay to say, kind of place, and it just sucks.
Well, you know what that has triggered for me of late? The person that comes back in response to a statement like that, where they come back with all the reasons for why not and whatever, or they're disrupted, or they see it as a basis to, you know, engage in metaphoric combat, you know, or debate. And my response is, what are you feeling right now? Like, what's the fear that just got triggered by what was just said? What's the discomfort underlying that response? Not responding to the response, but inquiring into what was that? Where did that come
Do you get an answer?
from? If asked with zero charge or projection or judgment, yes. If there's any English on it, if there's any energy of perceived judgment or engagement in their fear, in terms of joining the battle, no. But if I can hit just the right energy and tone with genuine, authentic curiosity, like a real invitation for sharing, like what what's that feeling about? Generally, yeah. It can actually take somebody right out of that fight or flight and into an internal, like, what am I feeling?
Mm.
And I'm inclined these days to do that more and more and more and more. I rarely these days respond to the retort.
I'm
I go
getting,
right for the what was the source of that? Where did that come from?
yeah. See, I'm getting that with my ex, but then it gets flooded over with everything else, like further down the line again, and then that gets swept away. But yeah. Doesn't get anchored down. Anyway.
Well, thank you for sharing the idea, Parmjit. That was good.
Yeah.
You already had it anyway, but yeah.
Well, we got a whole nother round.
I could talk forever about all of this.
Yeah, me too. All right about it forever. I feel like I'm co-wrote flow of handling so much of this. It's ridiculous. Well, not handling, but delving into, playing with. More like Play-Doh handling.
It's exciting though. All that stuff that Holochain is kind of presenting. I find it exciting.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't dive into this one too far, but Parmjit, you're familiar with the I See Zombies thing? So when I watched the Holochain thing the other day, just more of a heads up than anything else, I already told Trey, and I think I told Doug as well, actually. I had to stop partway through because I had a sudden desperate urge for a shower. Right?
Really?
Yeah. No, hang on. Don't assume why.
All right.
Right. So I followed it because, you know, when I get these sudden desperate urges, it makes sense to follow them. And then as soon, you know, I'd been in the shower for like all of about 30 seconds and an insight dropped in, which in essence is there is sadly a zombie right at the core of what they're doing.
Really?
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure needs to just play itself out. I don't think that it's something that I can kind of go and point to and go, hey, zombie, you know, fix this. I think it's going to have to play itself out. But at the same time, it sort of it removed my potential excitement, I have to say.
Interesting. So is it like a tangible it, or is it like a feeling resonance?
It's quite tangible now, actually. So based on two things. So, you know, they say it's agent centric. All right. And you know, the stuff that I'm doing with governance is not just one thing. There's agent, arena, and affordances. So you can't have any of them being the center all the time. Right. So making it agent centric is basically meaning that it's not going to work properly for the things that need to be managed for the arena or managed for affordances. It's always going to require workarounds. And
yeah, but nobody can get it 100% right. So what if they just need to aware about the different parts that the agents would need to have, but it's in a 3. And that's one of the principles, that things in 3s work better, and so on. I don't know.
Well, see, it's not so much, part of it is about things. It's about structure.
Yeah.
It's about kind of going, decentralization is the structure that we want. It's exactly the same as saying centralization is the structure that we want.
Yeah.
No structure
Mm-hmm.
Lives forever, right? No structure is appropriate for everything. There are no silver bullets, blah, blah, blah. So it doesn't matter whether you're going from centralized to decentralized or from decentralized to centralized. It's like either way, it's not the destination. So it's a needing to completely change the way of thinking about things so that it is not based on structure at all. So anyway, without going into it in too much detail, as I said, it's going to have to play itself out, for sure. But its death is basically written in it already.
Interesting. I didn't think he was that like over to one side, because he was saying, you know, you need moderation, and there's, you know, so that's a kind of centralization when you've got moderation going on. But oh, that's really interesting.
Mm. I actually just started probably writing up what's going to be the next piece that or the next post that I do, which is kind of around this. And it just starts off with where this sort of first came up for me, which was, you know, like when in early 2000s, I was working at this place that was like a regional office for a number of non-profit services, each of which had their own brand, if you like, because they were doing different things. And every one of those brands had a head office, or like the state office. And we were the regional office for all of them. And so something that we were already noticing, because they were basically CEOs for each of these ones, is that they would come in with an agenda and a strategy, which is basically either decentralizing or centralizing various processes, right? And what my mentor, Mike, said to me was that he had seen this everywhere. So he'd been like quite a senior manager at Australia's largest telco, through the change from being government run to being privatized and so on. And he says, every time there is a new CEO, without fail, they will either decide Depending on what the last one was doing. If the last one was decentralizing, the new CEO strategy will be to centralize. If the old CEO was centralizing, then the next one's going to be decentralizing. And I was like, oh, so it's like a pendulum. And it was like, exactly. Right. Now, why does this happen? Right. And it's because the conditions change, and the appropriate response to the conditions is sometimes centralizing and sometimes decentralizing. And if you try and make either of them the thing, then you just end up generating all the problems and you can't deal with them. So governance is not about structures. Governance is about steering through whatever the conditions happen to be. So if the power is not in the steering and you try and put the power in the structure, zombie.
But I still think, to me, they seem the closest yet of any presentation about how do we do this thing. And as I say, unless you've got the whole 100% thing, and then you can start over here. But if there's like energy already that's electric and magnetic and all of that over here, and if they really are open to, like he was talking about dependency trees and things, so they're obviously looking at second level stuff over and over again. It would suggest to me that they wouldn't be averse to, you know, having that pointed out, because it would be one of those dependency.
They might not be averse to it, but the thing is, they're not going to be able to do it on a pivot. This is a.
Are you talking about pivot? No, I'm talking about a hollow chain.
No, I'm not talking about the pivot. I'm saying they're not going to be able to do.
Holochain can't pivot
Yeah,
on this point.
It can't pivot to this.
At least not yet.
Okay.
Probably never, actually. They might be able to keep their infrastructure, but the entire architectural underlying principle is so different that, you know, anything that they've written, anything that they've done, it's start again from scratch. It's not repurposable. Which is why I'm saying zombie and not something that you can just develop. You know, you're never going to turn a zombie into a living creature. It's got zombie written. Yeah. So.
Oh wow! So I look forward to learning and seeing.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting take. It's sort of like, you know, a birth defect where they're missing a key enzyme.
Missing a what, sorry?
A key enzyme.
Yeah.
Their ability, the duality you're defining of need for centralized response. They don't have that affordance available because of hewing so strictly to the decentralized architecture principle. So it's an all or nothing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a very divine feminine perspective, by the way. That's a very Dale Pond kind of orientation to that. It's on an organic, you know, three-dimensional living awareness level that you need that you need flexibility in that duality, in that dimension. And if you're missing it, there's no way to reverse engineer it or integrate it later, because you've structured things to literally say no, to say never.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the putting the structure at the center. It's
understand. It's intrinsically forbidden on an architecture level.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I appreciate that.
Annoying as hell.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Actually, I did a lot of.
nobody said it would
research
be,
on that
nobody
myself.
said it would be easy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good that it is playing out now that things actually are getting recorded and that people can, pick up and learn from what's being recorded. Because they're going to have to try it, because the decentralizing the blockchain, this whole thing about this is the solution is not being seen as the pendulum swing it is. It's being seen as the thing.
That's the new thing. Yeah.
And
It's not
it's
actually,
happening forever.
I didn't see it as a thing. I saw it as a way of figuring out stuff that are needed for the thing.
Did you look at the Parmjit at that substrates versus structures video that I did a while back?
Yeah, I don't know about a video that you did, but that we had conversations about it. You drew diagrams and things.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so there's a video I did back in the thing to kind of talk about the difference between them. And the architecture that they're talking about is structure.
Okay.
So, yeah. Anyway, difficult, and I don't know. I don't know if anyone else is seeing this, or if I'm just,
I recognized it slightly different. I recognized it in terms of the last mile problem, which is there's an intrinsic centralized dimension to the de facto of the internet underlying it all, and there's no way around that yet. And that's their last mile problem, and they're no closer to solving it now than they were 10 years ago.
yeah, well, they won't be, because they're still putting in the last mile, because it's still structural. And when it's structural, there is distance involved.
Right.
And when there's distance involved, now you're dealing with nouns again. So it's an entirely different paradigm that is needed to support the new paradigm, right?
Yeah.
Funnily enough.
Yep.
So anyway, we have gone so far over, and thank you. It's been great to have a chat, though.
Thank you.
Listen to this again too.
Yeah, I will make sure to share it in the next, actually probably the next couple of hours.
Okay, and can you also send the link to the substrates thing again for me?
Sure, can do that. Thank you.
Have a great Christmas, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, you too.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.